Okay, we are good to go.
Welcome, everyone, to the March 2024 Delta ISB meeting. I now call the meeting to order and need to give an overview of the public comment process. We will take written questions and comments, follow instructions on your screen or on the meeting notice. And now let's do the roll call. Tanya. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, my mute button was blocked and I wasn't expecting to be first. All right. Hello, Tanya Heikkila. No new declarations.
Tom.
Tom Holzer, no new declarations.
Anna.
Anna Mikulak, no new declarations.
Bob.
Bob Nyman, no new declarations.
Obey.
Jan Taubate-Saker, no new declarations.
Kenny.
Kenny Rose, no new declarations.
Inga.
Inga Werner, no new declarations.
And I'm Lisa Wanger, no new declarations. Okay, so now we'll move it on to the housekeeping. And I'm going to turn it over to Kyra Wallace to explain how to keep us safe.
Thanks, Lisa. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. For those of you that are in person in Sacramento, in the event of an evacuation at the resources building, everyone is to remain calm, take all of your belongings, and proceed to the nearest exit out of the building. Staff will gather at the evacuation point at 1615 9th Street, and the public is welcome to join at that point. And that is all we have for housekeeping notes.
Thank you. Okay, so let me give an overview of the agenda now. Different from the public notice, we're actually going to swap the first two meaty items. That the food webs review will be first before the harmful algal blooms, and so the ISB has a draft document for the food webs review, and so we're going to determine if it's ready for public comments to be circulated, and then we're going to discuss the recently released harmful algal bloom monitoring strategy. Cyanobacterial harmful algal blooms for the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, and the next steps for submitting comments. Then we'll move into closed session to discuss the Delta lead scientist, and then we'll have little updates on other ongoing reviews, and in addition to some housekeeping in the beginning. So are there any public comments on the agenda, Edmund?
There are none.
Okay, great. So let's move on to agenda item 2, the chair's report and business matters. So the next Delta ISB meeting is on April 22nd, and it's just before the IEP workshop, the ecological program. And so that runs from April 23rd to 25th. And then the council meeting is on April 25th. So there's a lot going on that week. And the IEP workshop is free and open to the public. And I think we're going to have a nice talk from Bob Nyman and Lillian McCormick, who'll be giving a presentation on the food webs review. And staff are also preparing a poster on the subsidence review that will be presented at the IEP and also at the National Conference on Ecological Restoration from April 14th to 18th. On April 25th, we will provide a recommendation to the council. Well, if it does depend on what happens in closed session, but the plan is on April 25th, we will present a recommendation to the council on who we recommend appointing as the Delta lead scientist. But during that time, when we're addressing the council, there's also a potential to present other updates about ISB happenings. So we should probably just have a brief conversation about what should be presented. And so some of the things that we've been thinking about are that we could present our comments on the harmful algal bloom monitoring strategy. We could discuss plans for scoping out a new review on contaminants. We could talk about the DMDU inventory analysis or other ideas. And so do folks have strong feelings about that? Maybe those of you running the HAB review could, well, Anna's here, could say if you think you'll be ready by the 25th.
I would really prefer for Diane to be able to chime in on that as well.
We don't have to
I don't know.
absolutely decide this today, but
Yeah.
just any thoughts, you know, I'm sure the council will be interested in harmful algal blooms since they're such a public concern these days.
Yeah. I think we'll need to think a bit more about it. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, sorry to put you on the spot. We have time to figure that out. We have almost maybe over a month, so, but just let's put that on the list of things to think about. Inga, do you want to comment on the contaminants review? You think it's going to be ready for a presentation then, or should we wait?
You muted.
You're on mute, Inga. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I don't think there's going to be anything to present at that point, but you could announce it for sure, you know, and that, I mean, basically that Margot is starting in April and that we will start thinking about our approach and probably start with interviewing a bunch of players in the Delta who are involved in contaminants monitoring. And I have a start, you know, I have a few in my mind already who to talk to, and that will lead to others, but that's about, I mean, would you like me to prepare something more substantial, a plan of how we would proceed, or?
I bet they would really just be interested to know that it's a plan, and I wouldn't get too detailed about the process yet. But it might be an opportunity to tell them that you're interested in interviewing folks who have knowledge of contaminants because they could possibly have some recommendations.
Oh, well, I think that's the place to start because we want to have an overview of what's going on and what their thoughts are, you know, I mean, that would be the logical place to start. And I think both Bob and Diane have expressed an interest to be on the team. So is that still true, Bob, for you? Okay, good. So we have a team there that could be included in the announcement. But I think that's about how far I would go at this point.
Okay, well, just letting them know that's on our agenda, I think could be useful, but I don't think you would need to prepare too much. But just maybe give them an opportunity to weigh in on the scope a bit.
Lisa, it also might be worthwhile running the recommendations for the subsidence review. They should be there in draft form, and getting their feedback early might actually be helpful.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that would be a great. I did give them a little update about the workshop last time I spoke to them, but we didn't have the recommendations yet, so that would be great.
Yeah, they should be at least parboiled by then.
Okay, and then the DMDU inventory analysis, we haven't actually gotten an update lately. So it's a little hard to say whether that's going to be ready, but probably in a month, there'd be a product that we could discuss. I mean, we did have a presentation already on the inventory analysis, so.
And can I say one more thing? Of course, it's not exclusive. If anybody else on the DISB has an interest in being on the contaminants team, please let me know. There can be more than 3 people for sure.
Sounds good, Inga. So we'll also huddle up with the DMDU folks and see if we can have a nice pared down version of the inventory analysis to let the council see what we've been doing there with this learning about the scenarios. Okay, next item. We will need to elect a new chair-elect this year. On September 1st, Inga Werner will become the chair and Weinger will become the past chair, me. If you're interested in serving in the chairship, please let staff know. Okay, so now the other news is that Delta ISB postdoc Lillian McCormick and California Sea Grant fellow Kyra Wallace will wrap up their time with us at the end of March. And Kyra is going to share her reflections today, while Lillian and Christine Grace Kabugua, who wrapped up her postdoc in February, will present at a future meeting. And Lillian's starting a new job in April with the United States Bureau of Reclamation Bay Delta office as a fish biologist, so she's not going far. And because Lillian isn't going to be presenting today, I just want to take a minute to acknowledge her. I mean, both Lillian and Kyra have just played key roles in supporting the ISB in very different ways. But they share, what they both share, and to my mind, is how incredibly dedicated they've been to the work, and they've brought enthusiasm to just about everything we gave them to do. And I really did appreciate how excited they were to learn new things and dig in. And it was just really wonderful working with both of them. And of course, Lillian has made incredible contributions to the Food Web Review and the DMDU, the Decision Making Under Deep Uncertainty Scenario Review. We also took advantage of how proficient she was in data analysis and graphical data displays. So she developed two really clever figures over her time here, one for the Delta Conveyance Project review and one for the DMDU review. And she just brought, a really different perspective to try to communicate science. I think she's a very effective speaker and just has done amazing things. So I'll let folks who know more about the Food Web Review stuff say more. Does anyone else want to comment on Lillian's contributions?
Yeah, I'd like to express my appreciation to Kyra for the keeping us organized. She seems to be a very well organized person, and it carried over to helping us, particularly with schedules. And she took notes at some of the subsidence staff meetings we've had that have been very helpful. But just her organization in general is appreciated. And Lillian too helped occasionally with the subsidence review, and it helped us kept us organized, I guess. So many thanks.
Wonderful. Before we get to Obe's comment, Virginia, I see you've joined us. Would you like to say your name and say if you have any new declarations?
Okay, my apologies for being late. Virginia Dale, I have no new declarations.
Thanks, Virginia. Obe?
Yeah, I also want to acknowledge and appreciate the work both Lillian and Kyra did. Lillian, I was also impressed with the two products that, Lisa mentioned, EIR graphic, and also the programming she did in ways that she analyzed the data for us, and also the cone of uncertainty graphic I thought was great. And then Kyra was also equally very enthusiastic and very responsive always. And, this difficult topic of DMDU, she had a lot of patience in working with us on that. And only sad part is they both are leaving once I got to know them, and they only have had a short time with us. I wish they stayed with us longer. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Obe. Bob?
Well, I don't know where to begin here. I was trying to think of all these superlatives to say about each one of them, and I just can't think of really the right words. They were both exceptional, absolutely exceptional, and very professional in, I think, all of their dealings with us. Of course, with Lillian, I worked with her most closely on the Food Web report, and she kept us organized, on task, responsive to all of our requests and so forth, and did it in a timely manner, even though her plate was absolutely overflowing with requests, for other activities and so forth. So I can't thank her enough. And Kyra was always very, special in terms of, being responsive, to our data, or to my, day-to-day questions and needs and so forth. So I just say thank you, from the bottom of my heart. You guys did a wonderful job.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Tanya?
Yeah, I'll just echo everything that's been said already. And I completely agree with all the sentiments that have been shared about both Lillian and Kyra. They were just both unflappable. We tried to rattle them many times, and they were so good at everything we threw at them, and we threw a lot of things at them that they didn't necessarily have a deep background on or a lot of experience with, and they just ran with it and really had just good analytic skills, writing skills. They were curious. They were fun to work with. And I think Obey said patient with us. So, and yes, I'll miss them both.
Thanks, Tanya. Virginia?
Well, there's nothing else to say, but I just want to say, wow, you guys are going to go great places. And we are so thrilled to have been a part of this initial steps to your career. It'll be fun to watch and see what happens. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Virginia. And I'm just going to build on that last statement because I do really think that I saw a lot of growth in both of them over their tenure here. Hopefully we weren't, we were a good stop on the road of their career and helping them learn new things and learn how to work with policymakers and things like that. And I think, we've seen Kyra just really help us with the decision-making under deep uncertainty seminar series and the scenario review. And she learned really quickly from any of the feedback I ever gave her. And it was just very much appreciated how responsive she was. And yeah, I agree that they have all the skills they need to go very far, and we will definitely miss them. So good luck to both of you. We're going to hear from Kyra later. So, okay, next agenda item is that since the last meeting, Virginia Medueno's term on the council has concluded, and Governor Newsom has appointed Gail Miller to the council. He's also reappointed council member Daniel Zingali. And so I also like to take a moment to acknowledge Virginia Medueno's contributions. I'm really going to miss Virginia. She was a great champion of the ISB's work. What I really appreciated about her was just how curious she was about the people of the Delta, the problems they were having, or how they used and appreciated the Delta landscape. She was always interested in hearing from all voices and perspectives, and really kept an open mind that there were many perspectives and there's some hard things to balance, but she just really was a good listener and warm and gracious with everyone she spoke with. So I think we're really going to miss having her around. Does anyone else want to say anything about Virginia? I know probably others of you didn't work as closely with her. Yeah, Bob.
I would just like to echo what you had to say, Lisa, is, Virginia, I think, was very warm and respectful and curious. And she was just the kind of person I think you want as a chair. She had all the great characteristics. She could show empathy. She listened well. She would take all the evidence in before, making decisions, and just an all-around absolutely excellent person. And, I really, truly hope that our paths cross with her again someday, because I think she's somebody who really helps make us better in so many different ways. So anyways, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
I have two observations. I had the good fortune of briefing her a couple times at board or at council meetings, and she always asked very penetrating questions and was clearly very interested in what we were doing. And the second observation I had was I was just impressed by how positive she was all the time. I think that's a good characteristic of leaders, and she certainly manifested that. I really appreciated it.
Thanks, Tom. Tanya.
Well, like before, everybody said all the good things that were coming to my mind about Virginia. I just want to thank Virginia for her tenure and her willingness to really focus on the Delta as a place and to appreciate the diverse perspectives and people and issues that are facing the Delta, but to maintain that positivity in a place where there are a lot of challenges. I think that's just quite a gift. So we appreciate the time she spent with us, and her willingness to engage just thoughtfully and openly with the ISB.
Thanks, Tanya. Obe?
Yeah, I just want to, obviously others have said what I wanted to say, but I only met her a few times, but I was very impressed with the way she, worked with me right from the beginning. She knew about what, I was doing and always would be very responsive and very friendly. And I think that was very inspiring for me in the beginning, particularly. I want to appreciate her work.
Yeah, she really liked seeing the new science done and different perspectives being brought forward. It was great. Is that all our comments?
Oops, I thought I'd raise my hand.
You did, but then you lowered it, so I wasn't sure what that meant. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I too wanted to thank her, a voice of clarity, a voice of reason, a voice of interest, but mainly for me, every time someone would say Virginia, she would have the right answer, although I would raise my, my level. That was wonderful.
The other Virginia. Yeah, great. Okay, well, we'll look forward to meeting Gail Miller and we'll see what happens with the council. So also in personnel matters, Margot Matson will be starting as the new California Sea Grant State Fellow in April, and she'll be providing staff support to the Delta ISB. She has a Master of Watershed Science from San Diego State University and is interested in pursuing a PhD. Her thesis focused on characterizing wetland change using satellite imagery in the Colorado River Delta. And there's a plan that she'll be helping Inga Werner, who helped with the interviewing and matching process, on exploring the scope of a potential review on contaminants. And we're expecting that to involve seminars, panel discussions, and a literature review, among other tasks. So we're looking forward to welcoming her. She'll also be helping finish up the manuscript on the monitoring enterprise review to submit to a peer review journal that was started by Lillian and Christine. And Virginia Dale, who's the co-lead on that paper, along with Inga, will serve as Margot's mentors on completing this draft. And then based on her interest when she starts, she may also help with other ongoing reviews. Since the last public meeting, the Delta ISB received the following public correspondence, which is part of your meeting package. We have three things. Three individual people anyway. Bob Wright provided comments on the draft EIS, a comment letter for the Delta Conveyance Project. And yeah, and then California Water Research sent us the CMIP5 models project wetter trends that observed in Western US. So wanted to make us aware of that new research. And then California Water Research also sent concerns expressed by the Delta local flood agencies at the August 2021 levy DLIS hearing. And so making us aware of that historic information. Well, I guess 2021 isn't that historic, but don't forget what happened in the recent past. So we appreciate those comments, and we've taken a look at those, and we'll use that information accordingly. Edmund, are there any public comments?
Yes, we have one from Deirdre Desjardins. Deirdre, you have the ability to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, Deirdre Desjardins, and yeah, I thought I did want to say Virginia was just exemplary Delta Stewardship Council chair, and her warmth and ability to listen was, and it was really a new era for the Stewardship Council in terms of interacting with Delta stakeholders that I worked with closely. I did want to say, I feel sad about this because I actually had a role in the return. So the staff findings on the original, there is some politics involved in the governor's new appointment. The original water fixed twin tunnels report, the staff council findings were that it was not consistent with the Delta plan, first on best available science on sea level rise, and also on not meeting the Delta's place requirements. And so the whole project was basically sent back to DWR and go back to the drawing board. And Delta stakeholders I work with think that the governor is just taking fewer chances. The Randy Fiorini, who was the chair of the Delta Stewardship Council when that was remanded, was not reappointed. And the new appointment works closely with the governor. And I probably shouldn't be so outspoken, but since there's a history of politics affecting the Delta Independent Science Board, I try to let you know. And also, I just have a reputation as a truth teller already. I am going to send you a memo, which I'm putting together about last year. We're seeing really anomalous global temperatures, and they're continuing. And Gavin Schmidt, who's the director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Sciences, wrote an op-ed where he says, if these don't resolve by August, we'll be in uncharted territory, and it could imply that a warming planet is already fundamentally altering how the climate system operates much sooner than scientists had anticipated. So this is a huge source of uncertainty because climate models didn't capture the anomalous step increase in temperatures last September. And it's good that the Delta Independent Science Board is looking into uncertainty right now. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Deirdre. Yeah, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that science that's looking at that unprecedented warming. Okay, all right. So any other public comments, Edmund?
There were no additional public comments.
Okay. All right.
Can I comment?
Oh,
Can I?
Yes.
Can I respond really briefly on the climate side? There is a lot of debate in the climate community currently as to how to interpret the recent jump in warming, and there's a lot of uncertainty and disagreement as to whether this is temporary and will go back to the historical rate of warming or not. I'll remind folks also that not too long ago we went through this phase that at the time was called the warming hiatus, where the Earth was warming more slowly than climate models had anticipated. And so I completely agree that this is a very important development that we need to keep a very careful eye on broadly. At the same time, I just wanted to point out that in the climate science community, there is quite a bit of discussion as to these departures from model predictions are quite as unprecedented as this particular opinion piece made it out to be, but that doesn't in any way reduce the importance of what Deirdre was pointing out.
Looks like Deirdre would like to respond.
Yeah, I just have, so what was anomalous wasn't the overall temperature trend, but it was the 0.5 degree centigrade step increase in global temperatures in September. And that occurred in less than 1% of climate model runs. And as somebody with a background in nonlinear dynamics, that it really it really has me focusing on, you know, we also saw an unprecedented extent of marine heat waves. So it wasn't just in the tropics and it wasn't just in the Pacific. The Atlantic has really been anomalously warm, and then there's huge heat waves in the mid latitudes. So I tend to think that there's maybe some kind of threshold phenomenon with ocean atmosphere interactions, but that's just my impression from looking at it, and there is a trend in increasing stratification in global oceans, which may have contributed. But yeah, it's very much an active area of research.
Yeah, and yeah, and it may well be there's a lot of things that were happening concurrently last year. You know, for example, there was a fuel transition for oceanic shipping that resulted in a change in aerosols that were due to ocean shipping vessels. There's hypotheses related to water vapor in the stratosphere related to volcanic activity. There's, of course, the El Nino cycle and where we are in that. And so all points well taken. I just want to point out that there's a lot of potential factors coming together, some of which have different implications for what the longer term trajectory might be in terms of how that very steep warming last year impacts our understanding of how climate will evolve going forward.
Very interesting. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. So agenda item 3 is a discussion about the Delta Conveyance Project final environmental impact report review. So we agreed, well, let me back up a little bit. The California Department of Water Resources released the final environmental impact report for the Delta Conveyance Project on December 8th, 23. Excuse me a minute. Sorry about that. And certified the report on December 21st of 2023. And then on February 22nd, DWR submitted change in point of diversion petition for the Delta Conveyance Project to the State Water Resources Control Board, or the State Water Board, I'll say from now on. They will review the petition and then issue a public notice detailing their public review process. And a copy of that petition for changing that point of diversion is in your meeting packet. So we discussed the final EIR at our past 2 public meetings. And we will be drafting a memo on how our comments were addressed. And please get your written comments to staff by April 2nd. This is a flexible deadline, so if you need more time, let the staff know. And once we have the individual comments, I'm going to prepare a draft for you to review at a future meeting. Does anyone have any questions? Anna, was that a hand raise? No, okay, I saw your hand go up. Okay, sounds like folks don't have questions. So the key take home here is some of you have already gotten me your comments, or not me, have gotten staff your comments on the DWR DCP review. So I'll take anything I can get to help write that memo. Okay, so now we're gonna switch it up a little. Oh, are there any public comments on this this agenda item?
There are no public comments.
Okay, great. So now we're going to move on to agenda item 4, which was originally agenda item 5, which is the food web discussion. So we'll have the food webs review discussion before the Cyano-HABs discussion. Okay, so a little background. The Delta ISB finalized the prospectus at its June meeting and held a workshop on June 2023. Yeah, and held a workshop on November 8th to 9th, 2023. A draft report was released for discussion at the February 21st public meeting. And since then, Bob Nyman and Lillian McCormick have worked to address comments from the meeting, and a revised copy is now part of your meeting package. So there's a idea to circulate a public draft for a 60-day public comment period before the IEP workshop from April 23rd to 25th, where Bob and Lillian will present their draft findings and recommendations. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Bob to discuss that draft report.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I'm sure everybody had an opportunity to look at this in great detail over the last couple of days, so I look forward to your comments. But first of all, let me thank everyone who did provide us with comments and suggestions and so forth. Virtually everything that came in was absolutely excellent, and Lillian and I, took everything to heart, and we made an abundance of changes in the document in direct response, to your suggestions. And I would say overall that there were very, very few comments that were made that we felt we could not accommodate. I would guess that we probably accepted better than 95% of the suggestions that came in and made revisions to the document. So at this stage, I guess, I feel very strongly that it's ready to go out for public comment for the 60-day period. Of course, if you have any additional things you'd like to add, we'll try and get those done over the next few days so that we can get this out to the public as soon as possible. So I really don't have much more to say than that. We've worked hard on this, and we feel we've got a good, clean copy, one that truly reflects the entire process, from the interviews to the workshop, to everyone's comments, both from the board as well as outside the board and so forth. And we feel it's in pretty good shape now and is ready for the public to comment on. So kind of back to you, Lisa, if you would like to monitor the ensuing discussion. Would you like me to do that?
Well, probably because I'm sometimes losing my voice, it might be good if you did it. But here's a suggestion. What do you think about reviewing the recommendations with all of us? And so that might be a good jumping off point for a discussion.
Sure. I guess whoever has control, if they could go down to the recommendations. Okay, we have 4 main recommendations here. The first one is to let the key management needs inform the development of a comprehensive coordination and implementation plan for collecting, analyzing, and applying food web information. As part of this, the group or the people that we interviewed, the workshop attendees and so forth, felt that potentially having a collaboratory type of situation which focused on food webs would be a good way to start this the process of analysis and then move on to there. And this has been demonstrated in other areas, actually. For example, in Chesapeake Bay, is that it works reasonably well there as a good approach. You go down to the recommendation number 2. Second recommendation is to adapt the Delta research and monitoring programs to explore key aspects of food webs, relying on collaboration and best available tools and methods. The food web research traditionally has used a variety of methods that are actually, admittedly very time consuming and can be expensive because of that. But there are many methods and tools and approaches and so forth coming forth today that really help speed up the process and make it a lot more cost effective, as well as giving better insights into food web processes and their structure. And so we encourage this, as well as examining other parts of the food web in the Delta that have not received much attention in the past. An example of this would be detrital-based food webs. So there's still a lot to learn about the Delta, because the focus in the past has largely been on phytoplankton and zooplankton, and not on other either microbial pathways or detrital-based pathways. So we can go down to the third recommendation. The third recommendation is to employ appropriately scaled and spatially explicit food web models as determined by the management questions and the driving forces that we see in the Delta. The Delta, as you know, is a very diverse place physically and physiologically too, biologically. And the food webs in different parts of the Delta are different. And so having appropriately scaled and spatially explicit locations would be a very good step forward, to be able to address some of these management questions. And this recommendation has been made in the past. It was part of the Delta ISB review of non-native species and other reviews. So we can move down to number 4. And then this has to do with adaptive management, which, as you all know, is really one of the pillars of the scientific program in the Delta. And it's to link food web models to management questions and actions, monitoring and empirical studies using an adaptive framework. And this is where, again, we come back to the collaboratory. This would be the place where the analyses, synthesis, and so on would go into helping us, revise and on a continuous basis the various models and the understandings that we have of food webs in the Delta, and doing this on a continuous basis. So those are our 4 main recommendations, and we have some other relatively minor ones here, but that have to do with developing team building and science communication strategies. But still, these are quote unquote minor suggestions, but I think they're also incredibly important suggestions in being able to kind of fulfill the potential of using the food web approach for better management or improved management within the Delta. Okay. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I want to thank you for addressing the few comments I had, particularly the one about the ambitiousness of the goals. I thought you did a good job of admitting that, getting it out front. So thank you for that. The only comment I have left is because the recommendations are kind of long term, there's nothing that you're advocating short term. The additions you just talked about could be modified a little bit to fit that, to sort of get the process started. But I think that would be helpful if you had some suggestions of how to start the process.
Yeah, Tom, thank you for that. One of the ways to really start the process, it is truly complex, and it was to convene a group to develop a plan to move forward. It's identifying the management questions and then, you know, through that plan, can we identify, you know, short-term activities versus longer-term activities and so forth. I'm kind of speaking for the food web group now, but I think many people thought it would be a bit presumptuous to, you know, to come forward with short-term activities that could be done. Otherwise, we would end up with a big laundry list of do this, do that, and so forth. But rather to think about a comprehensive plan for being able to move forward, which would include as part of that strategic plan, short-term and longer-term activities. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, although my experience, that long-term plans very often, so that having something specific that people could start with, can be an effective way of introducing a new way of looking at a problem.
Yeah, I guess I thought we did that through, you know, suggesting the collaboratory and convening a group immediately, you know, to begin to talk about this, talk about, you know, what the way forward would look like. But if you don't feel that that's adequate, then maybe if you know, if you have some specific suggestions, I would welcome them. Because I guess I feel like we did that at least as well as we could with, you know, the input we received. But, you know,
Well, maybe you could emphasize that this is a initial step forward a little more emphatically than it is done in the reporting.
okay. All right, fair enough. That's good. Yeah. Great.
Anyway, I thought you did a nice job of editing the report. So thank you and Lillian.
Thank you, Tom. Lisa?
Yeah, hi. I wanted to echo what Tom just said, that I think the report is very well written and you were very responsive to all the comments. And so it's nice. It's an easy read. It's a good read. You, in addition to the recommendations, of course, you really did cover a lot of what happened in the workshop and some of what came out of the literature review. So it's got a lot of information for those who are interested in thinking about this effort to be more comprehensive about food webs in the Delta. So yeah, I just basically wanted to say that I read it carefully and I think it's in good shape. So
Great, thanks, Lisa. Virginia?
Again, you guys have taken on a big task and done a good job. But I have some comments about this section on adaptive management, because I think it could be a little bit stronger. And this conveys my concern with many of the Delta projects in that they treat adaptive management as a piecemeal approach. So in that section, there's a sentence that says adaptive management can be applied to each management question, and then it's added and used to examine the combined effects of multiple actions. I think it'd be better to say adaptive management should be applied to all management questions, and then say ideally in a holistic manner. And then the next sentence said the process is intended to help identify knowledge gaps, etc. And I think it should say the process should be used and really ask for it to be done and in a holistic way.
Oh, that's a good comment, Virginia. And, you know, I'm more than willing to make that change. That's no problem. But, you know, if you could send me the wording, I'll see that the change is made.
Okay, thank you. And again, very good job.
Thank you. Obey.
Hi, Bob. Seems like a nice report. Not my area of expertise, but I do have a question. And you mentioned, you know, using the models with management questions. I was curious how important it is to look at the management questions or system simulation under future conditions. Was that ever discussed through the workshops and deliberations? Like, you know, due to For example, we discussed warming, a few minutes ago, I guess. Is that part of the recommendation, looking at future conditions?
No, I'm gonna say no, it was not, because it, and this is my take on it, these discussions were so far ranging that it's hard for me to remember everything that was talked about over the months, but it was felt that that a lot of times it was going to become too speculative, because there's not only climate things going on, there's basically a changeover of species and process rates within the Delta. And if we started to get into that, we would end up with something we couldn't get our arms around initially. I think that we all realize how important it is, but we didn't know how to actually contain it in a way that we could articulate it, to folks that where it matters on the ground. We would speculate a lot. The Delta it's evolving very, very quickly ecologically, and so we decided that early on that we would focus on doing things, or say, writing a report around things that we felt that were doable and within the near, or within a decade or so, and having this collaboratory for these kinds of discussions, not only for synthesis and so on, but really thinking about how to chart a path forward. And and let it evolve that way, rather than in this report trying to do everything that we think needs to be done.
That makes sense.
Good, but if you have any wording suggestions that you would like to see, by all means send them over, and I'll take a really close look at them and see if we can incorporate them in some way. Okay, all right, thank you, Obey. Tanya?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think you did a terrific job. I know Lillian put a lot of work into helping with the editing as well. And I read the previous draft pretty closely and provided a lot of comments. And I think you just did a terrific job addressing all those comments, and appreciate that work. So that's all I was going to say. And then I heard Obey's comment, and then I heard your response, and I thought, oh, I wonder if we need a footnote in there or something small to kind of just at least flag that was those ideas were considered, but kind of out of the scope of this particular report, but could be something that the collaboratory takes on at some point if that gets picked up. So yeah, thank you. Great job.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tanya. You have great comments. And, if you feel that a footnote or something like that is needed, by all means, send over a sentence or two, and we'll see if see if we can fit it in there, some way that people will understand it. Thank you. Inga.
Yeah, so in addition, I agree with what others have said about the high quality of the report. And I just wanted to say, I also appreciate how you summarize the information that's already out there, which is no small task. It provides a great overview of what others has found and the major points of that research. So I really appreciated having that summary in there. Thanks.
No, thank you, Inga. Yeah, that was largely Lillian's doing. That was one of her main tasks, was to help provide that overview. And it was many months of work getting that summary done. And it seemed like every time we thought we were close to the finish line, we would find new papers and new individuals and other things would come to light. I can't even estimate how many times we went back and revised that overview. So, and it's probably, I'm sure it's still evolving. There's still, new stuff coming out. So anyway, thank you for that.
I just wanted to follow up on Obe's comment and Tanya's. Do you reference Dick Norgard's article in Rapid Change in the references?
You know, I think we do, but I can't be sure, Tom. I'm pretty sure we do.
Because that sort of addresses that topic, and you might be able to stick some words around where you reference it. I assume you would have referenced it.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's in there, and I'm not quite sure. I can't remember how it's used, but oops, oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
But I can't remember how it's used. Would have to go back and take a look and see. We can probably use it elsewhere as well.
Yeah.
That's a good suggestion.
That might be a way of addressing those comments. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was it.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. So any other comments?
Well, maybe I'll just build on this idea of future things for just a second. So this is a typical, once you have these food web models built, this is a typical thing to impose some change and see how well, see what happens to the system. But food web models differ in their ability to bring in environmental factors. A lot of them are really aimed at fishing, understanding fishing regulations, for example. So was that, I don't remember now, but did you say things about trying to find models that would have those elements so that you could project climate change effects?
I'm going to say no, but we had so many revisions in the last few weeks, and especially suggestions from Kenny about, the models and so forth. I may have to ask Kenny here if he has any thoughts, or he might respond there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean, Lisa, that they don't look at environmental drivers a lot.
Well,
that-
sometimes they use very lumped parameters for a lot of environmental changes as opposed to more mechanistic environmental changes, depending on the model.
I guess I respectfully disagree, but okay. I mean, EWE does that, but most models don't. So most models that I use for food webs, detailed salinity, temperature, chlorophyll, transport. So I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, I definitely was thinking of EWE, but isn't that a really common model to use?
No, I never use it actually.
Well, you never use it, but
No,
but
so this
my
is
point
where
is,
it gets
my
tricky
point
to
is-
report because EWE was developed as a fisheries management model. It was not developed as a bottom to top food web model. It was that's why it's so focused on the upper trophic levels and aggregates and simplifies the lower. But other models do the opposite, in fact, and expand on the lower part and then don't worry too much about harvest at the top end. So I think what I tried to do when I went through the report is not make it look like food web models equals EWE. Because that's probably not very useful in our system here in the Delta. We're not worried about harvest that much. So there's other models that are much more bottom oriented, like Atlantis, that does a similar thing and stuff. So I think it's important we don't equate that food web models equals EcoPath with EcoSim, right? That's just one manifestation of it. So
yeah, and really the point I was just trying to make was that discussed that some food web, that EWE might not be as good for projecting climate change effects as other models, or just it's something to think about when you're choosing your food web model.
yeah, so we didn't do anything about how do you pick a model, right? We don't have any best practices in there in picking from among the models. Most of the report was focused on convincing people they need to do something, right? But it's probably a separate topic is how do you go about taking an off-the-shelf model, developing your own, fusing models, which we do a lot, right? We couple the lower trophic levels with the upper. We didn't go into that. That wasn't really the topic of the workshop, how to actually do it, right? That would be a good workshop, but that wasn't the focus here. I think we were trying to convince some skeptical people and others that they should consider doing it was really the focus, so. If you're interested, I wrote a paper on best practices, but that's just, you know, that's just my own pontifications about it, so.
Great, well, thanks, guys. Obey.
Yeah, I just have one final comment on what we discussed just now about the future conditions. I really appreciate what Bob said about the complexity and, you know, not, you know, that's like uncharted territory in some ways. So you have to start somewhere. But my comment is that when you build a new model, and Kenny probably will appreciate that you have to make sure that your methodology and algorithms can handle the future environmental conditions that have not been observed, which is always a challenge, right? So that itself is probably a challenging task to design and build a model for future conditions. So I don't know if you agree, but that's kind of my feeling.
Yeah, so paper just came out in Marine Ecology Progress Series about advancing bioenergetics model to be climate ready. And that might be helpful to look at because a lot of those carry over. I mean, it's more than that. It's how do you include acclimation? How do you include adaptation into high turnover populations? How right, we're in novel conditions, right?
Right.
And as you know, OB, we have enough trouble with fitting the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we're moving all these relationships over to new combinations of drivers.
Yeah.
But we can do it. Just
well, you know, and also succession, right?
Yeah. So I can put that in. I can put that in the link if anyone's interested.
Well, Kenny, do you think it'd be worthwhile then adding a sentence or two in the appropriate place in the document?
You know, I read it like so many. I read it 2 or 3 times, went through it, and then all of a sudden, leave it to a geologist to say, "How about the future?" Right? And so, we should probably we can do that. We can add a paragraph about you know, climate ready is kind of the NOAA buzzword these days, right? You know, getting our tools climate ready, right? So yeah, we can do that. I think it'd be a paragraph or something, nothing, and it would just get inserted. But it is, yeah, it probably should be there.
Well, if you could draft something and send it over, and you know, we'll insert something in there, and perhaps, you know, even, you know, reference the Norgard et al. Paper from 2021 and so forth, because it seems like it would really be, you know, once you're into the collaboratory or the, you know, developing the plan for going forward, that's when you start to decide on the nuts and bolts of how you're actually going to do it. So, but yeah, if you can send that over, that would be wonderful. Anyway, other comments? If not, thank you all. You know, the comments that you did make on the document and in our discussions were just so valuable to me and to Lillian and well, just everybody. You really made this process a good one for us and really helped move it along quickly. So hopefully, I'll try and take everything that you send in over the next few days and get a clean copy back to Edmund, and then we'll go from there, get it out for public comment, and hopefully they
Well,
like it too.
we actually, Bob, I really appreciate that, and that will be wonderful, but we actually need a vote before we can release this for public review. So we'd be, at this point, if folks are comfortable, we'd be looking for a motion of having Bob address any comments from this meeting and then submit the revised draft to staff to circulate via the Delta Stewardship Council's listserv and other mailing lists for a 60-day public comment period. Virginia, you move?
Lisa?
I move that the motion is worded by Lisa.
And do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Inga. Okay, so now we'll do a roll call vote.
Lisa, we need public comments first.
Oh, I need public comments first. Thank you. Do we have any?
Yes, we have them from Deirdre Desjardins and Jay Ziegler. We'll go in the order that I called your name. First up will be Deirdre.
Yeah, I'm the modeling consultant for Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations and for California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, as well as informally with a number of other groups. And I just wanted to point out that our fishing groups were completely excluded from discussions about the modeling collaboratory. And it's really tragic because if we see the same pattern of so the precipitation distribution is sort of flattened, and we're seeing a lot more drier dries and a lot wetter wets, and the middle with near average years has just vanished. And to keep salmon from going extinct, it would be necessary to do better carryover storage and reservoir management that takes much less risk with exports. And there's a long history. DWR's own modelers have been recommending this since at least 2009, maybe as early as 2006. Oh yeah, since 2006, when they first noticed the reservoirs being drained to dead pool. And so unfortunately, I did raise the issue with NOAA, and the modeling collaboratory scenarios aren't going to consider a scenario where the current trends continue, and they're also not going to consider changes, the kind of sensitivity analyses that are needed about reservoir carryover storage. So we're trying to get the resources to do that on our own, but Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Association doesn't have a lot of funding because fishermen have just been decimated by water management and climate change, and they're looking at another closure of the salmon fishing season. So I hope we find it ironic that a project being titled Equitable Management for Equitable Water Management is excluding the fishing community and excluding, and it's not really co-production of knowledge with the fishing community about how to adapt to climate change. So we do hope that there will be some kind of a process, but the modeling collaboratory is primarily with environmental justice groups, have no expertise in modeling, and they're just gonna review the modeling and quote unquote express values. So it's substantially different than what was proposed under Peter Goodwin. And we hope at some point there will be something that has equal participation in the modeling technical group. But right now it's completely closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre. Jay, you want to go ahead?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. All right. Thanks. Well, thank you for the discussion this morning. I'm Jay Ziegler, the Delta Water Master, and I just wanted to offer a couple of suggestions in the context of both the ongoing efforts at the state board to update the water quality, Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, and related efforts. And in that context, I think there's been, so I really have two questions potentially suggestions for the report. One is that there's been a lot of suggestion that there's a correlation with the Sac Regional Sanitation Plant coming online, and in a modern sense, since 2017, kind of creating a near-term food web collapse. And I just wonder, one, if you all are looking into that unintended consequence of upgrading the Sac Regional treatment plant and significantly reducing nutrient discharge in the Delta. And second, in the context of the Water Quality Control Plan update, a couple variations of the plan look at the potential to really create a food web injection engine of a sort in the Cache Slough complex. And that is going to require significant attention to intertidal dynamics and influx of fresh water at certain times, especially to take advantage of the diurnal tidal cycles and really export phytoplankton and zooplankton across the Delta. And I just wonder if your report is going to kind of dig into those couple of very contemporary issues that I think a lot of stakeholders around the Delta are looking at today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. And I invite the board to respond to either comment at this time.
Well, I can respond quickly. First to Deirdre. Unfortunately, what you had to say, Deirdre, came across on my computer anyway. It's very garbled, and I had I'm not sure I really understood your statement. And so if you could, I guess, write it down and send it in, I'd appreciate it. Or maybe somebody else on the board here could summarize it. But I couldn't hear it well enough to be able to respond to you. With respect to Jay's comments, yes, those topics and many other topics were discussed during our interviews and at the workshop and so forth. But we felt, rather than get into the weeds about specific situations occurring in the Delta, that the report would probably try to give more of an overview, to be a report that would convince others of the need to have a food web perspective for virtually everything that's done, everything from single species management to multi-species management to restoration and so forth. And that the details of what would actually be done would come a little bit later, especially if there was a group convened to develop a plan that would have specific actions included in that plan. So the issues you raised are alluded to in the report, but there's not a lot of details there as to how they would be addressed. But rather we would see that coming out of the next phase of this, which would be a group that would be convened to do more specific planning. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Okay, and then I think at least the second half of Deirdre's comment had to do with representation in the food web modeling and whether there were any environmental justice issues and who's contributing to the food web modeling or food web conversations. So I think we did hear a little bit about that from our stakeholders, and I think that's there's some representation of that, right, Bob?
Yes, there was representation. There was tribal representation. Others, we tried to reach out broadly to every group we could possibly think of. Not every group responded, and we would go back to folks sometimes, several times, without getting a response from them that they wanted to participate. Others readily, participated. And if they showed an interest in it, then they were included either in our conference calls, or they were invited to provide written comments, or even attend the workshop and be part of the panels at the workshop. So we cast our net as wide as we possibly could.
I had heard Deirdre specifically mention fishers
Yes,
in community.
yes. The net was, our communications, went out to those groups as well. And I don't recall, whether or not they responded in a positive way that they wanted to be involved, but virtually, every group that we could possibly think of that was involved, even peripherally in food webs, fisheries, anything that was pertinent, the call went out to them to provide input.
Looks like Deirdre has her hand up again. Do you just want to give a quic follow-up, Deirdre? Because we do need to move on to the next.
Yeah. Just a quick follow-up. My comments were primarily about the modeling collaboratory, and I do appreciate that the Delta Independent Science Board is very open, and I did try to get the fishing community to weigh in on food webs. So just the fisheries experts had no bandwidth, and there's a serious issue with funding. While EJ groups and habitat restoration groups are getting funding to participate in Delta Science Program activities, the fishery groups aren't, and they're very bandwidth limited. Thank you.
Oh, that's helpful to know. That's probably why they weren't as responsive as we would have liked. Okay. Okay, well, at this point, I'd like to do a roll call vote unless there are any objections. Remember, the motion is to have Bob address the comments and then submit the revised draft to be circulated as part of a 60-day comment period. Virginia.
Oh, I approve.
Yeah. Yay or approve. Yeah. Tanya.
Yes.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Diane.
Yes, I approve, and I have no new conflicts. And I apologize that I had a conflicting meeting.
Thank you, Diane. Anna.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Obe.
Yes.
Kenny.
Yes.
Inga.
Yes.
And Lisa says yes. Okay, if the motion passes, then as it did, we tell Bob to go forth and make it so. So thank you, Bob, for all your hard work, and your hard work is rewarded by a bit more work, but we appreciate you getting that across the finish line.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, and now we're gonna move back to what was originally agenda item 4 is now 5. The draft Delta Cyanobacterial harmful algal blooms monitoring strategy. And the background here is that the Delta Science Program facilitated the development of a monitoring strategy for cyanobacterial harmful algal blooms in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And there's now this draft report that is the culmination of over 2 years of work, and the authors are seeking public comment on the document. The 30-day comment period opened on February 27th of 2024 and closes at 5 p.m. on March 28th, 2024. And comments received will be considered for the final monitoring strategy. So we are interested in this monitoring strategy because harmful algal blooms are a potential review topic. They have been something that we've been discussing as a potential review topic. And we hosted a well-attended panel discussion in 2020. HABs was identified as a monitoring gap in our 2022 monitoring review. And this strategy is a venue to implement the recommendations from our monitoring enterprise review. So far, Anna Mikulak and Diane McKnight have taken the lead in reviewing and reporting out on major comments. And they are going to report out, and then we'll discuss our comments. So the important thing to know here before we start this conversation is that we will not have another Delta ISB meeting prior to the March 28th comment deadline. So we'll have a vote after this discussion about whether we're comfortable delegating to Anna and Diane to draft a memo with our comments and to submit by the deadline. So now we'll hear from Anna and Diane.
Diane, did you want to lead the discussion, or would you prefer that I do that?
Sure, I can lead the discussion, and we wanted to have a concise approach to reviewing this document, and we in the first paragraph point out how this draft document covers many aspects, and certainly is an excellent review, or we say a good review of the environmental drivers. And it outlines a number of special studies that could be useful. So we have a supportive intro to our short letter, but then we go on to note several elements that could be strengthened in the draft strategy. And one of them, in the context of communication, is that the executive summary is vague and outlining the reasons why cyanobacterial HABs were identified as most problematic. There's some missing more explicit text in the executive summary that we felt would be helpful for advancing this strategy forward. Specifically, also the lack of funding is noted in one paragraph of the executive summary. It was very clearly stated in the next paragraph. There's a statement that there's a need to prioritize in taking a phased approach. So how is this going to work if there's no resources anyway to then prioritize? So that could be clarified. And then we also point out that there's not an explicit explanation for why public health is not a driver for developing the strategy at this time. And so our subsequent points relate to more specific details of the draft. The second one, again, is about this public health not being brought forward, and why is that? And we want to point out that these are toxins. The word toxin is used, but neurotoxin isn't used, and that's why that's sort of beating around the bush, maybe what's going on here. And then we felt that the third point, we felt that there was some more that could be said about remote sensing and potential role of other satellites. And then our fourth point, if you want to scroll down, I'm just highlighting these, assuming you've had a chance to read it, that there could be more broad thinking about integration of remote sensing with other sensing techniques in the environment, such as drone flights and in situ observations, having a more integrated approach. The fifth point is that the primary drivers, and point 5, are highlighted, but the interactions among some of the drivers are not addressed. And this might be a way that the draft strategy could be improved. For example, we talked about the interactions between precipitation events and nutrient loadings, and also the importance of nutrient stoichiometry in determining the species composition of the phytoplankton, which is the key aspect. There's a lot of discussion about measuring chlorophyll. That's not going to tell you if it's cyanobacteria, and it's not going to tell you if those cyanobacteria have toxins in their biomass. And so that leads to the sixth point about the focus on growth rates and abundance. but not so much on the concentration of the cyanotoxins, which is clearly more difficult to measure. And then our other point, going to point 8, if we can scroll down, is that this is like a strategy to develop a strategy and not a it's a general approach, and in that sense it's valuable, but the timing, the time frame of development may be mismatched with the dramatic increase in these events and the intensity of some of the high concentrations of these cyanotoxins in some areas in the Delta system, which are of concern in terms of aquatic ecosystem health and also public health. So, and then the 9th point is that there are quite a number of special studies, which we, think these are creative and there's a strength, but these could be prioritized with respect to some of these other considerations that we've highlighted, even though there is not clearly resources for these special studies, but prioritizing them might be useful as members of this research community and monitoring community are actively trying to solicit or gain funding for some of these studies. So Anna, do you have other points to add?
No, I think the document reflects both the points we had. I think you might have skipped over point 7, which is, I remember, one of the ones that you had raised when we spoke about also the lack of an examination of the role of selective grazing. So that's in the document, but I think as you were going through the numbers, it just got skipped over. And then we had this closing paragraph, which I'd like some feedback on, which is the document makes it very clear that there's no funding to support the development of a detailed monitoring plan, let alone to implement it. And while this is not a criticism of the document itself, we wanted to make a point that this should be a very high priority to provide funding to support a monitoring strategy for CHABs in the Delta system. But I think that covers it.
One point that we make also in this last paragraph is there's these comments about funding not being available. Maybe it would be useful to at least describe the regulatory framework in case that might elucidate possible paths for funding, which agencies at the state or federal level is the reason that the public health is not being considered because that comes under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And this issue in terms of public health doesn't only involve drinking water, it also involves exposure of the public to these toxins in a recreational context, in addition to the ecosystem health concerns. So does this recreational exposure concern fall outside the cracks in terms of a regulatory framework? And if there was some description of the regulatory framework with respect to this problem, that might be clarified.
Okay, so at this point, we'll open it up to discussion. I have a couple questions. So Tanya, and then Tanya, we'll go to Tanya. So there's also a pathway of exposure from irrigation, particularly if it's the style of, irrigation where water's being put in the air. I don't know how much of that is done in the Delta, but I didn't see any mention of that. Is that a potential gap in this, that they're not thinking about that pathway?
I think it's a potential gap. Anna, do you have a comment?
I was just gonna say, it certainly is not discussed in the report, to my recollection. Whether that is a form of irrigation that takes place in Delta, I don't know. Maybe somebody else does.
Yeah, I also don't know that. we could vet that before making any suggestions along those lines. Oh, Lauren may know. Is she, all right, we'll check in. And then the other thing was, you know what, I lost it. Let's go to Tanya, we'll come back to me.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Great job in drafting this. I like that it's concise and you hit the key points, and it was easy to read. I think the only place where I felt it maybe a little vague and could use a little more description was on point number 7. I wasn't quite sure what the context was there that would drive the need to really address that more, and it would just help to have maybe another sentence or two to help with that. And then I did wonder if perhaps it would be worth referencing the monitoring enterprise review that the ISB did as maybe just a good resource for thinking about kind of best practices in terms of, we have a section in there on individual monitoring programs and best practices that could just be worth reminding them, hey, take a look at this, thinking about how this monitoring program also connects to the broader monitoring enterprise in the Delta might be valuable.
And we could point out that one of the strengths of the strategy is that there is a plan to build on the existing monitoring enterprise.
Yeah, that would be great too.
With respect to grazing, we were referring to the selective grazing on different types of phytoplankton. Some zooplankton just don't want to eat the cyanobacteria, and there's whereas diatoms, for example, which never have toxins, are the primo prey, if you will, or for the zooplankton. So that we can write a couple more sentences about that.
Thanks.
Oh, wait, do you want to go next?
Yeah, you guys call on people.
Yeah, I just have one observation. I read the memo, reads well. My only comment on point number 1 is the last sentence. It seems like you say executive summary appears to be contradictory in some places. And the example was about funding being, lack of funding, and then say the follow-up is like a phased approach or prioritize investment. I wonder if that's a better example of this contradictory nature of the executive summary. And those two things, I mean, when the funding is available, you can still prioritize those investments. So I was wondering if there's a better example of that contradictory nature of the executive summary, or rephrase this in some way. And the other comment I had was the HABs was not kind of defined. It's like an editorial comment, but that's all I have.
I think we could potentially, Dan, if you're okay with it, soften the language in that sentence and just ask them to clarify rather than calling it out as a contradiction per se.
Yeah, I think I agree. Clarification, maybe confusing would have been a better word, but requesting clarification is even better.
Yeah, I think that would help, because contradictory seems like a strong word there.
And that would align with our general theme of that point, is that the executive summary is vague.
Yeah.
Tom?
I just wanted to second Tanya's statement that she really appreciated it being concise, and I think that's really helpful. So keeping it concise even after we've chewed on it for a while is an important thing. And I agreed with your need for the prioritization of the recommendations. The one place where I wondered, and it might be just because this is outside my area of expertise, was the satellite monitoring. I actually learned a lot when I read that section. I didn't realize there was a lot missing. So that could be written in a positive way, I think. And
Can you say that again, Tom? So what is the suggestion for that point?
to make
We're talking about
sure
point
it's
number 3.
written in a positive way, because coming at it from an outsider, I actually learned from the thing, and I just didn't realize what was missing.
So when you say in a positive way, you mean there is good news because there's all these other resources that are coming online that are available? Is that what you mean?
Do it in that kind of way.
And we could say something about its strength of this document is that remote sensing is highlighted, and then there could be more coverage of these other directions or something like that. These new
Because
satellites.
that's clearly going to be an important way of monitoring the problem. And then my last point had to do with long-term monitoring, and there was a discussion of an index. I think it was the microcytosis visual index, which had the long-term history.
Oh, I just lost Tom.
Delta going back to 2007. And oops, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the visual index that goes back to 2007, but
it seemed to me that was a very important observation that they're making. And it sounded like that index wasn't the best index in the world. It had problems with observer bias. And it would seem to me at least trying to fix that index as best as they could.
yeah, so they did. So the issue is that it's very qualitative in the sense that there's some images in the report that basically it requires just a visual inspection and then categorizing it into a small number of bins in terms of the presence. I do remember them talking about later in the report, there's a suggestion to have a annual workshop and to provide training on that visual index as part of that workshop. So I think that partially goes to your point, Tom.
Right. It just seems to me, even though it's not the best index in the world, it may be the best we have in terms of having a long-term history on. So until the satellite observation gets sort of standardized, it's important that they do the best they can with the MVI.
So are you suggesting, so for example, we could have an extra recommendation that supports this idea of providing training on the use of that visual index as a way of making those data more reliable and more consistent?
Yeah, I think that would be useful to highlight.
I agree with that, and it's also an opportunity to point out that this visual index is still better than just measuring chlorophyll, which doesn't necessarily tell you whether you have cyanobacteria or green algae or diatoms.
Mm-hmm.
So that if we add another bullet, we can point out that the advantage of this long-term record and that it's provides more resolution with respect to the real problem.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Thank you, Tom. Back to you, Lisa. Did you remember your second question?
I did.
Okay.
I did. And I appreciate that they talk about adaptively managing the way that they're monitoring, because there are so many technologies advancing right now. So there's I know of 2 huge funding programs where they're just funding researchers to do detection, treatment, control, so it does seem like it might, and I don't know if they ever said this in the report, but maybe talking to someone who's had problems for a long time and has been, keeping a better eye on the technologies could be part of the strategy. But also, I think the idea that you probably need a mix of technologies is one of the things I've learned in talking to these folks. So the satellites do one thing, but LiDAR does something else. And, so I think that idea that you don't just pick one technique, I think and I don't know how well that's already come out, but that's what I was thinking about.
And we get at this by pointing out the strength of integrating remote sensing with aircraft flights and drone flights and in situ sampling as a strategy going forward. And that's an approach that's being used in other areas where the public health is at risk or aquatic ecosystems are at risk, and there's a potential for taking mitigation actions that would mitigate the situation by managing flow in a particular way, for example.
Is part of your comment, Lisa, I wasn't sure. So I think part of it is what Dan just said. Is did you also are you also suggesting that perhaps in revising the draft that they speak to experts who have implemented CHAB monitoring strategies in other areas around the US, say in the Great Lakes or Chesapeake Bay, so on, in getting at their lessons learned to see how they could refine their strategy? Because perhaps they've done that, but it's not, they don't discuss parallels to other regions around the US.
Yeah, and again, I may have a biased set of what I know about, but I was thinking Great Lakes and Florida, where they've just been dealing a lot with these issues and seem to have considered various technologies for monitoring. But I also, as they acknowledge, it's a moving field. I did think it was a little odd where they placed the comment about adaptive management. It was under defining metrics, which I guess is not the worst place to have it, but it seemed like it might deserve its own space about really thinking hard about what technologies you invest in.
And Anna, we could make a point about how the report does a good job of explaining the challenges of the heterogeneity of the Delta system with respect to this problem and the bays here and the those inherent challenges, and that could be we could give them credit for that. Yeah.
We could definitely add that to that top paragraph where we
because
list
that
our
is
brownie
one of the
points.
contrasts between, say, the Great Lakes and the Delta.
Those are all great points.
I think we can accommodate these without making it much longer, though.
Yeah, so I think I've jotted down the recommendations. I think, as Dan said, we can incorporate all of those into the draft memo. And so I think the suggestion is if the board gives us the go-ahead, I guess through a vote probably, Lisa, correct, to turn this draft into a memo that is due, I think it's on the 28th, Edmund, correct? So next Thursday.
Right.
So we would essentially turn this around in the next few days and then with Edmund's help, submit it in a final form.
Right, so let me take over as chair here. And so we need a motion to have Drs. Mikulak and McKnight finalize the comment letter based off the discussion today and add any additional comments received by March 25th. And then we actually need a motion and a second.
I think 28th.
Well, the idea is that people would have until the 25th to give you written comments.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
You can reject that idea if you don't think that gives you enough time, but yeah, so that was.
Would there be additional written comments that we get beyond the comments here? Is that what you're saying?
That's the motion on the table, but if you don't want to have to deal with that, we could not make that part of the motion.
I think
and it's up to you.
So if assuming the 25th means 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on the 25th, that really gives us just 2 days to then turn it around, which is a little bit tight. But how about we compromise and we say by noon Pacific on the 25th, and that would give us just a little bit more wiggle room. And I think the only thing we'd have to be careful about is if in the event that someone says, please turn this into a 20-page report, that's obviously not a comment that we can address on 2 days' notice, right? So we will do our best to incorporate all the comments received by if we can make it noon on the 25th, I think that would be achievable, assuming the comments are of the same type of scope as the ones we've received today.
That's fair. I doubt anyone's going to give you a really massive comment. So, but good to be specific. Okay, so do we have someone who's willing to make that motion to have these two finalize the comment letter based off the discussion and any comments received by noon on the 25th?
I can make that motion.
Thank you, Inga.
A second.
Virginia seconds. All right, and now we'll do a roll call vote. Virginia,
I approve.
Tanya,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Obey,
Yes.
Kenny,
Yes.
Inga,
Yes.
and I say yes as well. So you two will do that.
We actually have public comments.
Oh, right. Sorry, I was supposed to wait till the vote. Okay, please move forward with public comments, Edmund.
Yeah, we have one from Deirdre Desjardins and Jay Ziegler. Deirdre, we'll go in the order I called your name. Deirdre, you have the ability to mute your microphone, and Jay as well. Sorry, let's go with Jay first.
All right, happy to jump in. Thanks for your attention to this issue. I think it is really important, and I just a framing issue. I do think that part of this discussion, which has highlighted the importance of differentiating causal factors for HABs in a complex hydrologic system like the Delta from Great Lakes, I think is really important and informative of wider strategies. Secondly, I think I am beginning to think in a body of research already undertaken that at its most extreme, HABs is a pretty strong indicator of certain conditions that we're monitoring for in water quality analysis today. And I'm interested in how the panel in this study may actually look at that issue, in effect indexing issues that we're analyzing today in a water quality context and the adequacy of those monitoring strategies. And then in a bigger picture, I think it's important to look at the Delta and its complexities and yes, to analyze for large systemic trends in the Delta with respect to water quality and development of cyanotoxins and HABs, but additionally to look at localized conditions and perhaps propose experiments that we may begin to look at to better understand more localized or sub-regional cause and effect elements for cyanotoxin developments and how we might mitigate those issues in different areas of the Delta with different conditions in mind, i.e. different salinity levels, different flow, different water temperature complexities, and where we might undertake perhaps different experiments around the Delta to learn more about how we address harmful algal blooms and reduce the threat of cyanotoxins to public health. So thanks for your attention to this issue, as I think it's a really important indicator for water quality concerns, really across the Delta and beyond, but in particular in the Delta, and as it affects both the direct impact that cyanotoxins will have, and for those that are fishing in the Delta, for those that are recreating in the Delta, for those that are coming in contact directly with water, but also for irrigation, and additionally for water supply that people rely on. So I see this as a really important issue, and I hope that the study can also enlighten those specific elements in thinking about how we mitigate for HABs in the Delta. So thank you for your work on this.
And maybe
Thanks, Jay.
I'll
Yeah, go ahead, Anna.
if I can respond quickly. I think those are all good comments. I was just scrolling back through in the latter parts of the draft report. There are these 19 special studies that are recommended, and a couple of them speak, at least in part, to what Jay was saying. Special study 3.5.3 calls for the investigation of how localized flow conditions, site-specific residence times, and tidal velocity influence CHAB formation. I think that speaks to the first part of Jay's comment. And then 3.5.18 talks about identifying practicable Delta CHAB mitigation options. So very good points. I think this also gets back at one of the points that Dan and I raised, which is there is this very large number of special studies, and one of the things that we felt could be done to strengthen the final report is to prioritize among them, because it's unlikely that they'll be able to do all 18, at least at the outset, or potentially at all. And so I think this comment further helps to emphasize the benefit of prioritizing certain of those special studies as the report gets finalized.
That's great. Why don't we go ahead with the other public comment?
Deirdre, you have the ability to mute your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, this is something, there was extensive testimony put on by the County of San Joaquin and other participants about the growing extent of harmful algal blooms in the Delta in the water fix, water rights change petition hearing. And I looked into, it's something I've been tracking since 2012. And I looked into the history, and Rec 1 is the skin contact recreational use. And what happened is the current water quality control plan dates back to the 1995. That was the last major update. And at that point, there weren't harmful algal blooms in the Delta. They emerged around 2000. And they designated the municipal intakes, water quality at the municipal, meaning the salinity standards at the intakes for the export pumps at Clifton Court Forebay and at Contra Costa. And I was asked a Department of Water Resources expert if he knew of any studies that justified making those, that linked water quality at those intakes to being able to meet recreational beneficial uses. Because obviously if they're posting notices in Discovery Bay saying don't go in the water, they're totally not being met in certain months. And he wasn't aware of anything. And when Water Board began their Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan update, it also wasn't on the radar screen for environmental and fishing groups. And they didn't raise it in scoping comments. And in fact, it only became a major issue after the water fix hearing ended in 2019, and Restore the Delta picked it up and started campaigning on it. But they've had already adopted the phase 1 objectives and the phase 1 substitute environmental object, and there were no provisions for harmful algal bloom monitoring or releasing or doing experiments to release flows. And so there is a Clean Water Act requirement, and it's just not included in monitoring. It wasn't foreseen when the board first did it. And in the deal making around the 1995 Water Quality Control Plan, Rec 1 got set to something which isn't really related to anything and to meeting that standard, which is a public health standard. This is another memo that I've been needing to write up for years, but it is something that is really important, and I think monitoring should be part not only of the permits for the State Water Project and Central Valley Project, but it should also be a requirement of the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. If it's not being funded by the state, then it needs to be funded by folks who divert water from the Delta and are affecting water quality.
Thank you, Deirdre. Any comments?
Thanks for those comments, and this seems to be relevant to the our point about addressing the regulatory framework. Is that correct?
I'll try and follow up with the memo ASAP.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we won't so much get into the nitty gritty of that regulatory framework, just are encouraging this draft to address the regulatory framework.
Yeah, that sounds great. And you're not on the regulatory side, but I really appreciate your attention, and that's the background.
Thank you.
Okay, super helpful conversation. So now you two have the go forth and make it so. You have that directive. And now we will hear from Kyra. So Kyra Wallace, agenda item 6, Kyra Wallace, the California State Sea Grant Fellow, is going to share some of her reflections on what she's learned from her fellowship and talk a little bit about the DMDU seminar synthesis that she just completed.
And Lisa, I need to step away just for 2-3 minutes. I'll be right back. But obviously don't wait for me, but I'm just giving you a heads up.
Thanks.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I'm just gonna share my slides, so bear with me for a moment. Oh, looks like I can't screen share. Edmund, are you able to allow me to do that?
Yeah. Hank, can you make her a co-host, Kyra Wallace?
Will do. Give me 1 sec.
Great, thanks.
You should be good now, Kyra.
Great, thank you. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to go correctly. Okay, great. Is everyone seeing the full screen slides?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, we can get started then. Let me just minimize the Zoom screen. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. This is a bit of a bittersweet presentation for me, since this will be my last ISB meeting and marks the end of my time with the Delta Stewardship Council. But I've really enjoyed this past year, and I think this is a good opportunity for me to reflect on some of the great projects that I've been able to work on, and some of the things I was able to learn. So without further ado, I'll jump in with my presentation titled Fellowship Reflections, Learning from a Sea or Delta of Information. So I wanted to start this presentation with kind of a high level overview of what these last 13 months have involved. And my fellowship kind of started at a particularly busy time with the ISB, as they were just embarking on 3 ISB reviews. And it's been really amazing to watch each of these reviews kind of evolve from what is initially just a draft prospectus into workshops and seminars and interviews and research projects, and eventually the final reports. I was able to take 7 trips to Sacramento for the in-person ISB meetings, as well as the Subsidence and Food Web workshops, and a meeting facilitation training. And I'd never been to Sacramento prior to this fellowship, so I really enjoyed being able to get to know the area a little bit more. Like I said, there's 2 ISB workshops that I was able to attend back in October and November of last year. Additionally, we were able to fit in 5 BMDU seminars into the year, starting all the way back in April of 2023 and concluding in January of this year. I was also able to work on 2 Sea Grant extension projects throughout the year, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on in the presentation. And then finally, I was able to participate in a boat tour of the Delta back in June, I believe, where I got to see some of the places that I kind of read and heard a lot about, like Frank's Tract. So that was really fun. And so this is kind of a more detailed look at the different projects that I was working on throughout the fellowship. I was involved a lot in different aspects of the decision-making under deep uncertainty review, kind of from the very beginning of my fellowship. I led the seminar series planning, which I'll talk more in depth about later on. And I was also involved in the inventory and analysis research portion of the review. And that was with Shoko, Christine, and Lillian. And we're currently conducting interviews with many of the authors whose papers we reviewed. And that's been really interesting to hear directly from those authors about how they considered uncertainty in their scenarios. I also worked on the food webs review a bit. I attended a lot of the initial stakeholder interviews that were used to inform the workshop and helped with some of the workshop logistics themselves, inviting speakers, prepping materials, and then attending the workshop and note-taking. I was also able to refresh some of my ArcGIS mapping skills, which I was really hoping to do this year by helping with the restoration synthesis project, and that's led by Dylan Chappell. And I updated the restoration map with more sites. Let's see if it pops up. There it is. So this is kind of the updated map to show the different restoration sites throughout the Delta, and that includes completed, in progress, and planned. And this map was featured in a poster presentation on the ecosystem amendment to the Delta Plan, and will also be included in the final restoration synthesis paper. So that was kind of a fun project. And early on in my fellowship, I was able to get involved with the Adaptive Management Forum, or AM Forum. And that was a 2-part event held in April and May of last year. And I kind of assisted on some different logistical planning things. And that was my first kind of look into how much work and planning goes into these kind of events. So that was a really good experience for me. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I've been able to work on 2 Sea Grant extension projects during the fellowship, and those have been really interesting and brought a lot of variety into the things that I've been working on. The first was with the Ocean Litter Strategy, and that's jointly run by the NOAA Marine Debris Program and the Ocean Protection Council. And I helped with some data work and visualization and attended various planning meetings for that. And then the other kind of more major project was a seaweed research project that focused on what they call demystifying seaweed as a culinary ingredient for the average consumer. So the goal was to kind of help increase domestic demand for seaweed as more farms are popping up on the East Coast and Alaska and hopefully California eventually. And so I created a database of global seaweed recipes. I looked at culinary characteristics of those recipes and recruited 2 local chefs to help us pilot some of those recipes. And kind of the goal of all of that is to create informational recipe cards that for each domestically produced species of seaweed, and those cards will eventually go on the National Seaweed Hub website, as well as some physical copies to be printed and distributed at various events. And this work is going to carry on after my fellowship ends, since a master's student at Scripps, which is my alma mater, is going to take on the project for her own capstone project. So that's really great to see that it'll continue on and the work will kind of progress after my fellowship. And it's great to see, since I incorporated seaweed research into my own capstone project when I was a master's student. So it's kind of coming full circle. And then finally, some of my other responsibilities included a lot of scheduling and facilitating meetings, doing accessibility work on public-facing documents, and some assistance with the subsidence workshop logistics, and some analysis of panel discussion. So kind of an overview of all the different projects that I've been really happy to work on this year. And then in terms of opportunities for growth, there were so many this year, and a lot of skills that I'd never done before, and I was kind of just jumping into, which I really appreciated, and I found that it helped me grow a lot professionally this year. So just a sample of a few of the things I've been able to work on in particular have been meeting facilitation, qualitative coding, event planning for things like seminars and workshops and forums, RStudio coding, which that was used to make the graphics of the initial results from the scenario coding project, document accessibility, note-taking, project management, public meetings, and networking. So a lot of different skills I was able to learn this year, and I think it really created a well-rounded year and built a lot of confidence in my own ability to learn quickly in a new environment. So for the rest of this presentation, I wanted to go a bit more in depth on the DMDU seminar series, since that was my main project that I was primarily responsible for. So just as kind of a recap of the series, and these all of the recordings are still available online if you're interested. It started in April of 2023 with Alice Hill, who talked generally about deep uncertainty and the benefits of DMDU. Then in June, we had Robert Lempert and Andrew Schwartz. They presented in person on available tools in DMDU and some of their applications specifically in California. In August, we had Andrew Parker and Jody Wong talk about cognitive biases and their relationship with scenario development. Then September, we had Brett Milligan present on scenario development methods with an emphasis on stakeholder involvement. And then finally, most recently in January, we concluded with Maryline Hasnut and Andrew Warren, who presented on dynamic adaptive policy pathways. So these seminars were an opportunity to explore some social science research that evaluates community responses and reactions to future scenarios and some potential approaches to mitigate concerns. And the goal of the series was to hear from a variety of speakers that have experience in DMDU tools in different contexts, who can share their insights and guidance with the Delta ISB and the general public through the seminar series. So overall, we had over 350 virtual and in-person attendees throughout the series, and the YouTube recordings of the seminars have over 740 views as of last week. And so these seminars brought in an audience of local and state agencies, NGOs, private businesses, academia, and more. And Maven's Notebook has published several summary articles on the seminars as well. So ultimately, all of this information is being input into the sort of final seminar series report, and that will likely be an appendix to the main DMDU review. And that's in the process of being edited right now. I've been working on trying to get as much done on it as I can before my fellowship ends. But this is just kind of a look at how it's structured. And the goal of this report is really to synthesize what was learned from the speakers and connect it back to the main review. So the report includes introduction, a section on how experts, which includes our speakers plus some additional literature references, how they characterize DMDU, how to implement a DMDU approach, so some practical examples from our seminar speakers of how they use these tools, a section on challenges and limitations to applying DMDU methods more widely, some opportunities and benefits, including the types of systems that would benefit most from these approaches, and then a final section for key takeaways learned. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the kind of how to implement the DMDU approach section, and bring up some of the examples we heard from the seminar series, just because I think the practical examples are a really helpful way to understand how these approaches work. So January speakers, Maryline Hasnut and Andrew Warren, talked about dynamic adaptive policy pathways, or DAP. And Maryline is the original founder of this DAP method, so she provided a lot of really good insight on some of the benefits of this approach. And she described it as breaking adaptation into manageable steps with linking the long term to the short term. And she described DAP as best used in situations where there's potential for long lifetime or societal impacts, high sensitivity to uncertain changes, risk of past dependency, where the decision you take now influences the decisions you can make in the future, or high investment costs. So on this adaptation pathways map below, you can see kind of the different possible sequences of decisions to achieve whatever the decided objective is, and key triggers or thresholds signal when it's time to start switching pathways within the map to avoid underpreparedness or decision lock-in. So that was one example. We also heard from multiple speakers about scenarios and using those to think about alternate futures. And one of our speakers, Jody Wong, described scenarios as essentially stories about how the world works, what the future looks like, and what our own role in the process is. And scenarios we learned can help decision makers consider multiple futures and see how different management decisions play out under different future conditions. And Brett Milligan, another one of our speakers, talked about his use of scenarios in the Delta, specifically to find an optimal proposal for redesign of Frank's Tract, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And he used stakeholder participation to survey residents about how they currently use the area and what they would like to see changed. And that ultimately informed the proposed scenarios and led to more community support for the project. We also learned about robust decision-making, or RDM. This approach is to use models to stress test proposed decisions against a wide range of futures. And the results are analyzed to identify key features that distinguish those futures in which proposed plans either meet or miss the objectives. And this information ultimately helps decision makers identify, modify, and choose robust strategies that meet multiple objectives over many different possible futures. So just a few examples of some of the methods that we heard about. So kind of looking at some of the general themes that we heard from the different speakers. First, deep uncertainty is something that we've heard characterized in different ways from different people, but the kind of common characteristics include unpredictability and lack of accurate probabilities. This uncertainty cannot be easily reduced, and stakeholders often disagree about consequences of policy or management actions. And one important distinction is that DMDU is then the set of decision support tools that can help evaluate the often ignored future events that fall under the category of deep uncertainty. And then we also heard about some of the main challenges and limitations to using a DMDU approach. Multiple speakers talked about the impact of cognitive biases, which can limit decision makers' perspectives. And these biases often arise from not being accustomed to assessing a risk that is unfamiliar. And developing scenarios, we heard, is one way to help mitigate these biases and help a decision maker or manager consider multiple futures instead of just one. We also heard about some of the socio-political constraints that make it difficult to apply DMDU tools more widely. And this is due to a few reasons we heard, like the tendency for decisions to be made for the short term rather than the long term, political aversion to risk, and high turnover, which again lends itself to more short-term planning. And then finally, we also learned about situational limitations, where a system may not have the characteristics in which using a DMDU approach is worth the time and funding. I believe Robert Lempert was the one that told us that there's screening tests available that can help you decide whether or not DMDU is needed in that case. And then finally, some opportunities and benefits that were shared throughout the seminar series. There were many, but just a few, being widening of perspectives, providing a structure for anticipating and managing uncertainty, allowing for collaboration and knowledge sharing, and helping decision makers create no regret decisions. And several seminar speakers also made it clear that there's a lot of benefits still from even using a really simplified version of a DMDU approach without kind of the full scale modeling or analysis. So many benefits from the different applications. And then within kind of this final report that's in the draft version, there's kind of a list of key takeaways, and I thought it'd be interesting to highlight what I thought were some of the most impactful ones. First, there's this idea of acknowledging biases in the decision-making process, and that if you take steps to minimize those biases, it will lead to more rational and robust decisions. Next, there is the concept of stakeholder participation, and seminar speakers shared multiple benefits, including improving scenario design, having opportunities for knowledge sharing and collaboration between the scientific and non-scientific community, and can lead to greater community support for a project. And Brett Milligan said that based off his experiences using participatory scenario development, it can help identify commonalities in what people want across the board, and you can ultimately incorporate that into the management plans. Next, using DMD tools can create space for conversation. And these are not conversations necessarily about how to reduce uncertainty or how to improve predictions, but more so to talk about what the future might look like and how different decisions play out across those futures. Robert Lumpert emphasized that the quest for prediction can distract from the main task of seeking creative solutions, and I kind of like that quote. Lastly, using a DMDU approach can help reframe uncertainty. It can encourage decision makers to embrace it rather than ignore it, and several speakers mentioned that it can even be reframed as opportunity to realize an optimal future. I also want to note that yesterday I was able to share some of the same information on the seminar series to previous Delta lead scientist Laurel Larson's class at UC. On post-normal science, and had to hear their thoughts on the subject. And then the draft seminar report will also be released later today after this meeting, so that will be coming soon. So as my fellowship's been wrapping up, I've been working on figuring out what my next steps are and how I want to use what I've learned this past year. Right now, I'm applying and interviewing for jobs in the nonprofit, philanthropic, and state agency realm. And I'm primarily looking at ocean-focused topics, kind of moving back towards some of the things that I focused on in grad school, like coastal resiliency, plastic pollution, regenerative aquaculture, and community engagement. So I'm trying to cast a wide net and be open to a lot of different opportunities. But mainly, I would really just like to be able to apply some of the many skills that I've learned during my fellowship to whatever might be next for me. But before I jump into whatever my next job is, I'm taking a really exciting break to travel in South America for 2 months and work on my Spanish skills. So if you have any recommendations or tips, please let me know. But that's kind of my exciting next steps. So with that, I would just like to end with some acknowledgements and thank everyone who made my year with the Delta Stewardship Council so amazing. The people I've gotten to work with this year have really been the reason it was such a great experience. And I would just like to say a wholehearted thank you, and thank you to all the ISB members who said some really nice comments earlier on in the meeting. So that's all I have, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this point.
Oh, thanks, Kyra. That was a great talk. It was a nice summary of the DMDU seminar series, a nice refresher. And that's great that you got a chance to present this to Laurel's class. I'm glad you're already out there communicating to the broader stakeholder community. Do folks have any questions for Kyra or tips about South America? Tanya.
Yeah, make sure you go see Machu Picchu, and just thank you, Kyra. I hope you heard all of our glowing comments about you earlier in the meeting, and we will miss you. I do want to know what your favorite seaweed recipe is.
Favorite seaweed recipe? Well, this was kind of I'm not the best chef myself, but in terms of things I tried from other people or places, embarrassingly enough, it's from Trader Joe's. It's a seaweed kind of like crispy, spicy snack. I don't even know exactly what kind of seaweed it is, but I've been eating that every week. But yeah, not much of a seaweed chef myself, but hopefully we'll explore that some more.
Great. Kenny?
It's hard to follow that question. I was just wondering, in general, do we have a mechanism for capturing how, when people are done, kind of an exit interview on terms of how things could be done better and differently, and what was good and what were challenges? Is there like a formal process for that?
Yeah, there is. Next week, I think on my last day, I have kind of a formal exit interview with Dylan Chappell, who's the program manager for my unit.
Okay.
So there is, yeah, kind of a formal process for that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Obe.
Hi, Kyra. Thank you. I won't repeat what I said earlier, but thank you, and it's been a pleasure to work with you. You know, like Tanya, I would recommend going to Peru, but I will also add Colombia and maybe Chile and Bolivia, places I've been to.
That's great.
Thumbs up from Inga too. Okay, Diane.
I wasn't here earlier, so I also want to express my thanks to all your work and your very clear presentation just now. DMDU has been a very new topic for me, but really relevant for many issues that we're considering and other, and broader issues, adapting to climate change and other challenges. And one thing I haven't done that's on my bucket list is go on a cruise on the Amazon. So I encourage you to do that while you're young. I'm not as young as you are, and I'm not sure I'm going to persuade my husband to do that. Well, congratulations on a great year and your contributions.
Thank you. And that's a great suggestion. That sounds like an amazing thing to do on my trip.
Yeah. So yeah, Kyra, I'll just say we are going to miss you, and we wish you the best of luck in moving on with your career. We know you'll find a great position to apply your new skills to. And yeah, we hope you really enjoy South America too. Okay, with that, we will move on to our next item. Let's see. The next, are there any public comments?
Yes, we have one from Deirdre Desjardins. Deirdre, you have the ability to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm working on this analysis, but I wanted to point out there may be an example of cognitive bias in the Department of Water Resources latest delivery capability report. They analyzed the trend in runoff in Sierra watersheds and found no change, but they used the Mann-Kendall test on the 30-year running average. And I've downloaded the data and I'm gonna run an analysis, but I'm pretty sure if you do a lowest filter that locally weights, that you will see there's a very clear nonlinear trend in climate data, and a nonlinear increase in temperature and a nonlinear decrease in precipitation. But they said that they decided there wasn't enough evidence because they'd have to look at a 30-year average and see a shift, and that's not going to detect shifts in a time of rapid climate change. So I'm going to be doing the analysis, but it's an example where we're not even looking for the causes of reduced runoff because we're framing things in terms of 30-year running averages. And we know that climate change is accelerating. So I hope to get that to you, and I hope that can not just consider the perspective of, I really respect Andrew and I really like a lot of the research he's doing, but there also has been a history of biases by Department of Water Resources to not considering trends that might reduce the reliability of the State Water Project. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre. Okay, all right, with that now, if anyone has any comments, let me know, but otherwise I'll move on to the next thing. So the next thing that we're going to do is go into closed session, and for personnel matters, this is the Delta lead scientist appointment. And the Delta Stewardship Council, in partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey, is in the process of recruiting the next Delta lead scientist, who's anticipated to start this summer. Per the Delta Reform Act, the council is the appointing authority and responsible for appointing a lead scientist after consulting with the Delta ISB. And this consultation includes a recommendation to the council on the appointment based on the interview process. So we formed the Delta lead scientist interview panel, which is an advisory committee to the Delta ISB to help with reviewing applications and conducting interviews. And the panel consists of 3 ISB members myself, Inga, and Bob, and 3 council representatives, Virginia Medueno before her term ended, and Julie Lee and Jessica Pearson, and a USGS representative, Mike Turkowski. So 2 applications are currently under consideration for the appointment. Dr. Gary Lamberti from University of Notre Dame and Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham Myers from the U.S. Geological Survey. The interview panel has interviewed both candidates, which included a public seminar and a meet and greet, and those were recorded and part of the meeting package. The interview panel held a noticed meeting yesterday to debrief on the interviews conducted. And so we will now adjourn to meet in closed session to discuss the Delta lead scientist appointment. And we will reconvene in open session probably in 45 minutes, so roughly around 4 p.m. I'm guessing. Oh, sorry, that's my time. 1 p.m. Pacific time. And this closed session is authorized under Government Code Section 11126, Subdivision A. So at this point, we move into closed session, and you all have separate links for that, the next part of the meeting.
There we go, and we are good to go.
So thanks, everyone. I'll now resume the open session of the Delta ISB March meeting and report out about our closed session. So we met in closed session and have agreed to move forward. We will contact the top candidate for the position to see if they are interested in being recommended for the appointment by the council. And if so, I will draft a letter of recommendation to the council for the appointment and present it to them at their April 25th meeting. We took a roll call vote on this plan, and the yes votes were unanimous. And then at this point, we'll just see if there's any public comments.
There are none.
Okay, great. So are there any public comments for matters not on the agenda?
There are none.
Then the final agenda item is preparation for the upcoming Delta ISB meetings. Well, second to last item. We're preparing for the April 22nd meeting. So it's before the IEP workshop. So we're hoping that a lot of ISB members will be able to participate in the IEP workshop. The salinity management workshop, we expect to get an update from them. We expect to talk about the subsidence review. And then I think there are other reviews that we will probably be taking care of. Okay, Edmund, did I miss anything?
Yeah, we're still planning the April meeting, but you've covered the general gist of it. Thank you.
Okay, great. And now the last item is Edmund is going to give us a review of items for follow-up.
And also there was no public comment for the previous item in terms of follow-up. The ISB took 3 major actions today. Bob will go ahead and address everyone's comments from this meeting to release the food webs review for public comment before the IEP workshop. Anna and Diane will finalize the food webs comment letter.
I have no control over turning their video off. I don't think. I'm a co-host, or actually I am a host.
We're hearing, video folks, we're hearing you.
Meeting room.
Can we mute them?
Unfortunately, I can't be the host.
I think Kyra can because she's co-host.
Okay, but just to continue, Bob will we'll finish addressing comments from the food review to release it before public comment, and then Anna and Diane would finish up the HABs letter to submit before the comment deadline. But we'll summarize in more detail about the next steps for that in an email for the notes, and then to Lisa, based off the action taken by the board, you'll contact the top candidate to see if they're interested in the position, and if so, you'll draft a letter of recommendation to the council. That's all I have for items for follow-up, and then there are no public comments on this item.
Wonderful. With that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for hanging in a few extra minutes, and we'll see you in April.
Long, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, Virginia.